everyone, it's Haley, and today I'm finally going to be doing my recommended reads for children's classics. Now, I mentioned in one of my TBRs a few months ago that I was reading a couple of children's classics in preparation for doing a recommended reads for children's classics. Now, that was a few months ago, and you guys have been bugging me ever since then for this video, and I was going to put it off until I had read even more children's classics, but I was thinking about it and I was like, then this video won't be up until like later next year, and I don't really want to wait that long, and I don't want to be rushing through a bunch of children's classics just to get this video up. So keep in mind that these are just my favorites out of the children's classics that I have read. I still have a ton on my list, like I have Black Beauty, Wizard of Oz, Little Women, I'm forgetting a ton, I know I am, The Wind in the Willows, I think that's what it's called, Narnia, like I have a ton on my list that I haven't gotten to yet. So before you tell me why, or before you yell at me and say, why isn't this one on here, go to my Goodreads and check to see if it's on my shelves, and if it is, then I know about it and I am going to read it eventually. But if it is one that I don't have and you want to recommend it to me, feel free to comment. So yeah, with that being said, let's get into the video. And you guys know that I am a sucker for beautiful classics editions, so I have multiple editions of many of these, and I'm gonna show you a lot of the editions so then you guys can get a vast array of options for if you want to purchase these books. So these are in no particular order, it's just kind of the order that I'm picking them up in. But the first one is Anne of Green Gables by L.N. Montgomery. So here I have two editions. This is the Puffin and Bloom edition, and this is the Barnes & Noble edition. I'm not sure if you can get this one anymore, but I know you can for sure get this one. But I absolutely love Anne of Green Gables. This is kind of the quintessential Canadian story, and it takes place in PEI, which is somewhere that I really want to go. And Anne is just this girl who has such a positive outlook on life, and you kind of just fall in love with her view of the world. She makes you want to be a kid again because her imagination is just so vivid, and seeing the world through her eyes is just absolutely amazing. I haven't continued with the series yet because I know that L.M. Montgomery didn't want to write the rest of the series. She was actually commissioned to write the rest of it and ended up doing it because she needed money. So I haven't continued with it yet, but I might eventually. I just think these books are so great, and I just absolutely love them. They're just so good, and I love Gilbert. Like, Gilbert and Anne are just so cute together. And yeah, I grew up watching the movies for this, and I read the book for a class a couple of years ago actually, and just fell in love with the story, and I love it. It's so good. You need to read it. Next up is Heidi by Johannes Spiri. This I only have the one edition of, the Puffin and Bloom edition, but I do want more. I've just kind of been taming myself. But I read this recently, and it is the story of a girl who lives in Switzerland with her grandfather. She lives in the mountains, and they just kind of live this simple life, and it's kind of nice to just see such a sweet girl living this simple life. And she ends up coming into contact with a girl who is disabled, and she believes that the fresh air where she lives with her grandfather will help to heal this girl. And it's just kind of the story of their relationship and Heidi's relationship with the world around her and the people around her. I just really thought this was such a great, just wholesome and heartwarming story. It is a little bit preachy at times, but at the same time, it's a product of its time period, so that didn't really bug me too much. But I did think it was such a great story, and it just really warmed my heart. Really, I should have just started with this one because you guys obviously know that it's going to be on here, but that is Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass by Lewis Carroll. I am absolutely in love with Alice in Wonderland. It is one of my all-time favorite stories. Like, I just fall in love with it every time that I read it, and it's just so fabulous. I love all things Alice. I've been recently thinking about getting an Alice tattoo, actually, like something small, but I don't know yet. But I literally, like, you can tell how deep my love for this story goes. Through the Looking Glass is actually the first Alice book that I read, and I almost like that one more than Alice in Wonderland, but I do really love both of them. But this is the Barnes & Noble edition, and this one is the Puffin Classics editions. I really like these ones, especially because under the jacket, I'll show you, Look at how cute it is. I absolutely love this one. I got it when I was in England, so yeah. And I also have Through the Looking Glass in this edition, but not in the hardcover. But you just can't help but either love or absolutely hate Lewis Carroll's just nonsensical writing style. It doesn't adhere to any rules, and it kind of pokes fun at typical Victorian conventions, which I just absolutely love. I've studied this story so many times. Basically, my motto in university is how many classes can I take where we study Alice in Wonderland, and I have taken one every single year now, and I have one coming up next semester too, so I can take a lot. But it's just such a great story, and it's classic for a reason. I just love the nonsensicalness of it, and it's just really great. Next up is A Little Princess by Frances Hodgson Burnett, and I grew up watching the movie for this, and I distinctly remember loving the movie, but I read the book fairly recently and I fell in love with the book even more. I love Sarah and all the stories that she tells and how she has this imagination that can't even be killed, I can't think of a better word for killed, can't be like diminished, I guess, by her circumstances as she's in this boarding school and she's being treated really poorly. And I just loved seeing her kind of keep that hope alive and seeing her interact with all the other girls. I just thought it was such a great story and I just really loved it. It kind of has this mystical nature to it which can't be beat. So this is the Barnes & Noble edition. I'm not sure like what this Barnes & Noble edition is called, but it's super shiny, and I think it replaces these editions because I haven't been able to find these anymore when I go to the States, but this one I have been able to find. And then I also have the, of course, Puffin and Bloom edition because I have all of them and I absolutely adore them. Next up, by that same author, I have The Secret Garden, also by Frances Hodgson Burnett, and this story I loved because it was different, because the main character isn't this like wholesome, always like good, like her view of the world is fabulous, she's so nice and sweet, she's too good for the world, kind of. That's kind of the main character that you seem to always get with female protagonists in children's classics, but in this one, she is honestly a brat in the beginning. She is Miss Mary quite contrary. Like, she is just this brat that treats everyone around her poorly, but she hasn't really been taught any better, so it does make sense. And you do get to see her grow out of that, and you see her in this secret garden, that she falls in love with this garden and she brings her friends there, and you really get to see her and how nature makes her kind of this wholesome little girl, which is kind of a typical literary convention, but I think it's done really well in this book and I really enjoyed it. I loved seeing her and her friends and seeing her with the, I forget his name right now, but the boy who, the disabled boy who she interacts with, and they just like don't get along at all, which I just think is so funny because they don't get along at first because they're the exact same, but seeing their relationship develop is really nice, and I just think this is a really great wholesome story. Also, I'm not sure if I'm being politically correct when I say disabled, so I'm sorry if I'm not. Tell me what I should be saying if that is incorrect. So yeah, I don't know because these terms keep on changing and like I'm not trying to be rude, but I end up being rude on accident. It happens often. Next up is Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. I had to read this for a class and I did a comparative essay between this one and Alice in Wonderland where I compared the male protagonist and the female protagonist in the dream world. So I really kind of scoured this book and Alice in Wonderland, and I found it to be really interesting because the male protagonist has such an easy time in the dream world, like he's able to really control it. You see Peter controlling all of Neverland and it's kind of his own world for him to manipulate. He's the master of it, whereas in Alice in Wonderland, the world completely rejects her. So that's just my little nerdy tidbit that I thought was interesting. If you want to look into it more, it's really cool. But Peter Pan, I really love. I love Wendy and I love the whole concept of it in Neverland. And this is really, I think, a book for anyone because it has the adventure and it has kind of like the wholesomeness at the same time, so it gets a little bit of everything and it's just a really great story and just really fun. And my final children's classic is actually one that a few of you may argue isn't a classic, but it's definitely headed that way. It's not really, I don't know how old it has to be a classic, but honestly, I consider it a classic, and that is Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, really the whole Harry Potter series by J.K. Rowling. This book has just been so iconic, and it has been around for a really long time, and it has never gone out of print, I don't think, at least, and it is never, like, it's just so talked about and it's so loved. And look at how universal the love for this series is. Like, everyone, whether you're a kid or an adult, loves this series. At least most people. I know there are people out there who don't like it, but most people really love it, and there's a reason it has such a fan following, and that's why I really do think that this is a children's classic, because it is a children's book, and honestly, it's just so iconic, and it's going to be around forever. So it's definitely a classic, and if you haven't read this yet, you definitely should. I didn't read it until, I didn't finish reading it rather until a couple of years ago. I finished the whole series, and it's such a great story, and the characters, the whole world that's created, it's just indescribable, and you just have to read it. So those are all of my recommendations for children's classics. Like I said, I do still have a ton that I want to read, and I just haven't gotten the chance to get to yet. But if you do have one that isn't on my Goodreads or anything that you think I would enjoy, then definitely comment down below and let me know. And yeah, let me know what your favorite children's classics are, or if you have read any of these. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!